The shuttle shook as it passed through the station's docking field, pressed her face against the small window, and watched as Harmony Point grew larger. The research station floated in the darkness of space like a metal flower, its many arms reaching out toward the green moon below. She had seen pictures before, but nothing prepared her for how big it really was. "First time on a deep space station?" the pilot asked without looking back. "Yes," said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. She pressed them flat against her knees to stop the shaking. The pilot laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "You're the new observer for the nursery, right? Good luck, you'll need it." Did not answer. She had heard the warnings many times already. They were the most dangerous species in 3 sectors. They were hunters, predators, killers. Their bodies were covered in black scales that could stop a knife. Their golden eyes could see in complete darkness. Their claws could cut through metal like paper, and she was going to take care of their children. The shuttle landed with a soft bump, grabbed her bag, and walked down the ramp into the station's docking bay. The air smelled strange, like wet stone and something wild. A tall human man in a military uniform was waiting for her. His face was hard and his eyes looked tired. "Doctor," he asked. "Just is fine. I'm commander, I run security on this station." He did not offer to shake her hand. "Follow me, I'll show you to the nursery wing." They walked through long metal corridors. Other species passed them, some recognized and some she did not. A few of them looked at her with what she thought might be pity. She tried not to think about what that meant. "3 observers came before you," said as they walked. "The first one lasted 6 days. The second one lasted 4. The third one didn't even finish her first shift." "What happened to them?" "Nothing serious. Some scratches, some bites. Mostly they just couldn't handle the pressure," stopped walking and turned to face her. "The cubs are young, but they're still, they see everything that moves as either a threat or a meal. And humans," he paused, "humans look a lot like meals to them." Nodded slowly. "I understand." "Do you? Because the Galactic Council thinks this is some kind of peace mission. They think if cubs grow up around humans, maybe they'll hate us less when they're adults." Shook his head. "But those cubs don't care about politics. They care about hunting. And you can't observe them from behind a screen. You have to be in there with them." They started walking again. The corridors became darker as they moved deeper into the station. The walls changed from smooth metal to something that looked more like rock. The air grew warmer and heavier. "This is the section," explained. "They don't like our lights or our temperatures, so we let them make it feel more like home." They stopped in front of a large door, pressed his hand against a panel, and the door slid open with a low hiss. Inside saw a room that looked like a cave. The ceiling was high and covered in shadows. The floor was soft with something like moss. In the center of the room, 7 shapes were sleeping in a pile. The cubs. Each one was about the size of a large dog, but they looked nothing like dogs. Their bodies were covered in scales so black they seemed to eat the light. Even in sleep, she could see their claws, long and curved and sharp. Their tails twitched as they dreamed, probably about hunting. "They're beautiful," whispered before she could stop herself. Looked at her like she was crazy. "They're deadly." A sound came from the far side of the room. Looked up and felt her heart stop. An adult was standing in the shadows, watching them. She was huge, at least 2.5 meters tall, with scars running across her scales like a map of old battles. Her golden eyes fixed on with cold hatred. "This is Roka," said quietly. "She's the cub's caretaker. She doesn't like humans." Roka walked toward them slowly. Each step was silent despite her size. She stopped in front of and looked down at her. Her mouth opened slightly, showing rows of teeth that looked like they could bite through bone. "Small," Roka said. Her voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "Soft, weak." She leaned closer until could feel her hot breath. "You will not last." Knew she should be scared. She was scared. But she had learned long ago that showing fear to predators only made them want to chase you more. so she kept her face calm and met Roka's eyes. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until I'm ready." Something flickered in Roka's golden eyes. It might have been surprise, it might have been respect, or it might have been amusement at watching a small creature pretend to be brave. She turned away without another word and disappeared into the shadows. Let out a breath. That went better than I expected. Did not answer. She was too busy watching the cubs. One of them had woken up and was looking at her with curious golden eyes. It was smaller than the others, with scales that seemed slightly lighter. As she watched, it yawned, showing tiny sharp teeth, and then put its head back down to sleep. Something warm moved in its chest. It felt like the beginning of something important. That night, set up her equipment in a small room next to the nursery. She was tired from the long journey, and her eyes kept closing on their own. She told herself she would just rest for a moment, just close her eyes for a few minutes. She fell asleep sitting up, her head tilted back against the wall. She woke up to a strange feeling. Something wet was touching her hair. She opened her eyes slowly and found herself looking directly into a pair of golden eyes. One of the cubs was standing right next to her, sniffing her head with great interest. Its nostrils flared as it took in her scent. Held very still. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure the cub could hear it. The cub tilted its head to one side, studying her like she was the most interesting thing it had ever seen. Then it made a small sound, almost like a chirp, and ran back toward the nursery. Let out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling again. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, she felt something else. Excitement, curiosity, and the strange, impossible feeling that she had just made her first friend on this station. 1 week passed on Harmony Point and was still alive. This surprised everyone except herself. The cubs had decided that she was interesting. Not food, not a threat, but something new and strange that needed to be studied. They followed her everywhere. When she walked through the nursery, 7 pairs of golden eyes watched her every move. When she sat down to write her reports, small black shapes circled around her like sharks in dark water. They were testing her, understood this. In the wild, young predators learned about their world by pushing its limits. They wanted to know what she would do. Would she run? Would she fight? Would she cry? The largest cub was named. He was almost twice the size of the others, with thick scales and eyes that burned with challenge. On the 3rd day, he decided to test the human directly. Was walking across the nursery when she heard the soft sound of claws on stone behind her. She knew what was coming. Lunged at her from behind, his mouth open, his claws extended. Any normal prey would have screamed and run. Simply stepped to the side. Flew past her and landed on the soft floor with a confused grunt. She turned and looked at him calmly. "Nice try," she said, and then continued walking. Stared after her with his mouth hanging open. This was wrong. This was not how prey was supposed to act. He tried again the next day and the day after that. Each time simply moved out of the way and kept going. She never ran. She never screamed. She never even looked scared. The other cubs watched these failures with great interest. The small one that had sniffed her hair on the first night was named. She was the weakest of the group, always pushed to the edge of the sleeping pile, always eating last. But she was also the most curious. While was busy trying to hunt, was busy watching her. She noticed things the others missed. She noticed how moved slowly and carefully, never making sudden movements. She noticed how's voice was always soft and gentle. She noticed how sometimes looked at them with warmth in her eyes, like they were something precious instead of something dangerous. One evening was sitting in the corner of the nursery, writing notes about the cub's behavior. Crept closer, moving so slowly that she was almost invisible against the dark floor. Saw her coming but pretended not to notice. She kept her eyes on her notes and her body relaxed. Stopped just an arm's length away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, very slowly, reached out with one paw and touched its leg. Looked up and smiled. "Hello, little one." His eyes went wide. She had expected the human to jump or pull away. Instead, the human just sat there, warm and calm and unafraid, made a small chirping sound and moved a little closer. Raised her hand slowly, giving time to see what she was doing. Then she reached out and scratched gently behind his ear ridge, in the spot where the scales were softest. Froze, no one had ever touched her like this before. Parents did not show affection to their young. Weakness was death. Softness was shame. Cubs learned to be strong by being alone. But this feeling was not weak. It was warm and safe and good. Leaned into his hand and closed her eyes. A low rumbling sound came from her chest, something between a growl and a purr. From across the room, Roka watched with cold eyes. She had seen everything. The next morning, Roka found in the feeding area, preparing food for the cubs. The female stood in the doorway, blocking the light. "You are making them soft," Roka said. Her voice was hard as stone. "Did not stop working. I'm giving them something they need." "Need?" Roka stepped closer, her claws clicking against the floor. "They need strength. They need to learn to hunt, to fight, to kill. They do not need to be touched like pets." Finally looked up. She met Roka's golden eyes without fear. "Have you ever thought that maybe there's more to strength than killing?" Roka's mouth pulled back, showing her teeth. Foolish words from a foolish creature. In this universe, the weak are eaten and the strong survive. There is no other truth. "Maybe," said. "Or maybe the strongest thing in the universe is choosing to be gentle when you could be cruel." Roka stared at her for a long moment. Then she made a sound of disgust and walked away, but noticed that she did not forbid her from touching the cubs again. Days turned into weeks. One by one, the cubs began to seek out. First it was, who now followed her everywhere like a shadow. Then it was, a curious cub who liked to investigate everything owned with her nose. Then came the twins, and who discovered that Slap was the perfect size for two small predators to share. Even eventually stopped trying to hunt her. He still pretended not to care about the human, but often caught him watching when she played with the others. One night, she woke up to find him sleeping against her feet, his large body curled up like a kitten. The cubs had invented a new game. It started by accident when fell asleep during her afternoon rest time, had crept over and curled up against her side, enjoying her warmth. When woke up, she had smiled and scratched his head before going back to her work. The next day, 2 cubs joined, the day after that 3. Now it was a competition. Who could get closest to the sleeping human without waking her? Who could find the best spot on her warm, soft body? The cubs would wait until his eyes closed, and then they would move in, silent as shadows, placing themselves carefully around her like pieces of a puzzle. They did not understand why they wanted this. They only knew that being close to her felt right. Her heartbeat was slow and steady. Her breathing was peaceful. Her body was warm in a way that their scales were not. For the first time in their young lives, the predator cubs felt something they had never felt before. They felt safe. 3 months had passed since arrived on Harmony Point. The scared young scientist who had stepped off the shuttle was gone. In her place was something new, something the station had never seen before. She was a human who had earned the trust of predators. The napping game had grown beyond anything the cubs had planned. What started as a quiet competition had become a daily ritual. Every afternoon, when lay down to rest, 7 pairs of golden eyes would watch and wait. The moment her breathing slowed and her body relaxed, they would move. Always came first. She was small enough to fit perfectly against the side, her head resting on the human's arm. Then would arrive, draping herself across legs like a heavy blanket. The twins and would squeeze in wherever they could find space, their tails tangling together. The other cubs would pile on top, each one trying to get as close to the warm center as possible. And finally, after everyone else was settled, would come. He would pretend he was just passing by. He would act like he did not care. But somehow, He always ended up pressed against back, his large body curved protectively around the whole pile. One afternoon, woke up and could not move. She tried to shift her arm, but something heavy was lying on it. She tried to move her legs, but they were pinned down. She opened her eyes and saw nothing but black scales and golden eyes staring at her from every direction. 7 cubs, all of them piled on top of her, all of them purring. Tried to take a deep breath, but even her chest was weighed down. Was lying directly on her stomach, and 2 other cubs had somehow gotten onto her shoulders. She was completely trapped under a mountain of baby predators. For a moment, she felt panic rising in her throat. Then she heard the sounds they were making, that low, rumbling purr that only made when they were completely happy and safe. These deadly creatures, these children of the most feared species in the galaxy, were using her as a pillow. Started to laugh. She could not help it. The situation was so strange, so impossible, so wonderful. Her laughter shook her body, which made the cubs shift and grumble, which made her laugh even harder. She did not notice that the security camera in the corner was recording everything. Commander was drinking his morning coffee when his assistant burst into his office. "Sir, you need to see this." The video played on the screen in front of him. He watched a human woman disappear under a pile of cubs. He watched her wake up, struggle, and then start laughing while 7 predators purred on top of her like. Put down his coffee very slowly. How many people have seen this? It's already spreading through the station's network, sir. Someone in the science department thought it was cute and shared it. Closed his eyes, the crew. They're not happy, sir. That was an understatement. By the end of the day, the video had spread beyond the station. By the end of the week, it had reached every corner of the galaxy. Everywhere, people watched in amazement as the cubs of the most feared species in known space cuddled a human like she was their mother. Ambassador, the human diplomat stationed on Harmony Point, saw opportunity where others saw scandal. He requested a meeting with immediately. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked, his eyes bright with excitement. Shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I fell asleep and got sat on by some cubs. I'm not sure that counts as doing something. You've changed how the entire galaxy sees the. For generations, they've been seen as monsters, as killing machines without feelings or bonds. And now everyone has watched their children choose to cuddle with a human." Leaned forward. This could be the beginning of real peace. But not everyone was happy with this change. Roka had watched the video 17 times. Each time, she felt the same cold anger growing in her chest. Those cubs were warriors. They were hunters. They were supposed to grow up to be proud and fierce who would bring honor to their people. Instead, they were acting like prey, soft, weak, dependent on the affection of a human. She found in the nursery that evening. The human was sitting on the floor, surrounded by cubs, was chewing on her sleeve. The twins were fighting over who got to sit in her lap. Even was there, lying beside her with his eyes half closed in contentment. "You have ruined them," Roka said. The cubs looked up at their caretaker, but they did not move away from, they pressed closer to her instead. Roka's eyes widened. This was wrong. She was their caretaker, their authority, their guide. They should listen to her above all others. She commanded, "Come here." His eyes opened fully. He looked at Roka, then at. Slowly, deliberately, he moved closer to the human and laid his head on her shoulder. A low growl built in Roka's throat, but before she could say anything more, growled back. It was not loud, but it was clear. He was warning his own caretaker away from the human. Roka stared in shock. In all her years of raising cubs, she had never seen such a thing. A cub defending prey against its own kind. It went against every instinct, every tradition, every truth she knew. She turned and walked away without another word. That night, Commander came to see with a warning. "The High Council has been watching. Some of them think what you're doing is good for their people, but others," he paused, Others think you're poisoning their young, making them weak on purpose. That's ridiculous, said. I'm just treating them with kindness. I know, but kindness isn't something they understand very well. His face was serious. They're sending a delegation to evaluate the situation. If they decide you're a threat to the cub's development, they'll remove you. And they might take the cubs somewhere far away, somewhere they can learn to be proper again. Felt her heart turn cold. She looked at the nursery, where 7 cubs were sleeping in their usual pile. Had her favorite spot against empty blanket, as if saving it for her return. They can't take them, she whispered. They're mine. She stopped, surprised by the word that wanted to come out. Nodded sadly. I know, but to the High Council they're just cubs and you're just a human. Stayed awake long into the night, watching her cubs sleep. She thought about the first day, when had sniffed her hair with curious eyes. She thought about's first purr, about's slow surrender, about all the moments of trust that had built between them. She did not know what the delegation would decide. She did not know if she could fight against the traditions of an entire species. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let them take her family without a fight. The delegation arrived on a ship that looked like a blade cutting through space. It was black and sharp and dangerous, just like the creatures inside it. The whole station seemed to hold its breath as the visitors walked through the docking bay. Elder was at the front. He was old, older than any had ever seen. His scales were gray where they should have been black, and deep scars covered his body like a map of violence. One of his eyes was clouded and blind, lost in some ancient battle. The other eye burned with cold fire. He walked past the humans without looking at them. To him, they were not worth his attention. They were weak creatures, soft and slow, good for nothing but running and dying. The fact that one of them had been allowed near cubs was an insult to his entire species. Where are the young ones? He demanded. Commander led the delegation to the nursery wing. Was waiting outside, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She had dressed in her best clothes and practiced keeping her face neutral. But inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. Stopped in front of her. He was so tall that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eye. Up close, she could smell him, a scent like old blood and smoke. You are the human, he said. It was not a question. I care for the cubs. You play with them, you touch them, you let them lie on you like you are their nest. His voice dripped with disgust. This is not care, this is corruption. Before could respond, the nursery door opened. The cubs had heard voices and come to investigate. When they saw, their eyes lit up with joy. Reached her first, rubbing her head against leg with a happy chirp. Was right behind her, sniffing its hand. The twins came next, followed by the other cubs, all of them eager to greet their favorite human. Walked out last. He looked at the delegation, at the old elder, at the warriors standing behind him. Then he walked past them all and stood beside, pressing his large body against her side. Watched all of this with growing horror. These were cubs, children of hunters born to be warriors, and they were acting like pets. They were showing their bellies to a human, exposing themselves in the most vulnerable way possible. They were treating her as if she were their pack leader. Impossible, he breathed. What have you done to them? I haven't done anything, said quietly. I just showed them kindness. Kindness, spat the word like poison. There is no kindness in the universe. There is only strength and weakness. You have made them weak. He raised his voice so that everyone could hear. By the authority of the High Council, I declare these cubs corrupted by human influence. They will be removed from this place immediately and sent to the training grounds on our. There, they will learn what it truly means to be. Felt the blood drain from her face. You can't do that. I must, gestured to his warriors. Take the young ones, keep the human away from them. The warriors moved forward, immediately lowered his head and growled, a real growl this time, full of threat and warning. The other cubs gathered around, forming a protective circle. "They don't want to go," said. "Can't you see that? What they want does not matter. They are too young to know what is good for them." I was cold. "Remove them." The next few minutes were chaos. The warriors tried to grab the cubs and the cubs fought back. Bit one warrior so hard that he broke through the scales on his arm. Screamed, a high-pitched sound of fear and rage that echoed through the halls. The twins scratched and kicked, refusing to be held. Finally, the warriors managed to pull the cubs away. They were dragged toward the door, crying and struggling and reaching for with their small claws. No, tried to run to them, but two warriors blocked her path. "Please don't do this. They're just children." Looked at her with something that might have been pity if predators felt such things. "They are, and you are nothing." The cubs were taken away, was locked in her quarters. Through the walls she could hear them howling. Hours passed, sat on her bed, her hands shaking, her eyes dry. She had no more tears left. She had only anger, cold and hard, building in her chest like ice. A sound came from her door. It opened slowly, revealing a familiar shape. "Roka." The caretaker slipped into the room and closed the door behind her. Her golden eyes studied with an expression that was hard to read. "Why are you here?" asked. Her voice was rough. Roka was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down, folding her large body into the small space with surprising grace. "I have watched you," she said. "From the first day I thought you were foolish, weak, a soft creature playing with fire." She paused. "I was wrong." Looked up surprised. "The cubs are healthier than any I have raised before," Roka continued. "They eat better, they sleep better, they fight less among themselves, and their minds," she touched her own head. "Among our people, many cubs do not survive to become adults, not because they die in battle, but because their spirits break. The training is hard, the loneliness is harder, many simply give up." Thought of the smallest and weakest, who had blossomed under simple kindness. She thought of the aggressive one who had learned that strength did not mean cruelty. "These cubs will not break," Roka said. "They are strong in a way I have never seen. Not because you made them soft, but because you showed them that they matter, that someone cares if they live or die." "Then help me," begged. "Help me get them back." Roka was silent for so long that thought she would refuse. Then the female leaned forward, and her golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. "There is a way, an old way from before our people reached the stars." She bared her teeth and realized it was a smile. "It is called the trial of worth. If you can prove that you have value to the cubs, that they need you, then even an elder cannot take them from you." "What do I have to do?" "You must survive being hunted. From sunset to sunrise, you will be prey in the hunting grounds. If you live until dawn, you have proven your worth." Felt cold fear wash through her body. She had seen how fast they could move. She had seen their claws, their teeth, their deadly efficiency. A human in a hunt was not a participant. A human in a hunt was a meal. But then she thought of her cubs, locked away and crying for her. She thought of gentle purr and protective growl and all the love that had grown between them. "I'll do it," she said. Roka nodded once, her eyes filled with something that looked almost like respect. "Then we must prepare. You are not fast enough to outrun them, you are not strong enough to fight them." She leaned closer. "But you are human, and humans have their own kind of strength. We will find it together." The hunting grounds were in the station's largest, a space the size of a small forest. Trees grew tall and thick, blocking the artificial light. Streams ran through rocky valleys. Caves dotted the hillsides. It was beautiful and wild and deadly. Stood at the entrance as the last light of the artificial sunset faded. She wore simple clothes and carried nothing. The rules of the trial of worth were clear. No weapons, no tools, no help. Just one creature against the hunt. Behind her, Elder stood with his warriors. His face showed no emotion, but his single eye burned with certainty. He had seen many trials in his long life. No human had ever survived one. This soft creature would be caught within the hour. When the darkness comes, announced, the hunt begins. You will have until dawn to survive. My hunters will track you, corner you, and capture you. If they succeed, you will never see the cubs again. Turned to look at him. Her face was pale but calm. And if I survive? Then by ancient law you will have proven your worth. The cubs will be yours to raise as you see fit. His mouth twisted. But you will not survive. Humans were not built for hunting. You are slow. You are weak. You are prey. Maybe said, we'll see. The last light faded. The darkness came. Ran. She did not run blindly. During her time on the station, she had studied maps of the Roka had helped her plan a route, pointing out hiding spots in difficult terrain. Humans could not outrun, but they could outlast them. Your species has a gift, Roka had told her. You do not give up. When other creatures would stop, would rest, would surrender, humans keep moving. It is annoying. A pause. It is also powerful. The hunters entered the forest 30 minutes after. There were 5 of them, all experienced warriors who had tracked prey across a dozen worlds. They expected to find the human hiding in a cave or trembling behind a tree. Instead, they found nothing. Her trail led through streams that washed away her scent. It crossed rocky ground that held no footprints. It doubled back on itself and split into false paths. The hunters were confused. Prey did not behave like this. Prey ran until it was tired, then it hid until it was found. This human was doing something different. Hours passed. The hunters grew frustrated. Every time they thought they were close, the trail went cold. They could not understand how such a slow creature kept slipping away, but could not escape forever. As the night wore on, her body began to fail. Her legs burned with exhaustion. Her lungs ached for rest. She had been moving for hours, and she could not keep going much longer. She found herself in a narrow valley, surrounded by high rock walls. Behind her, she could hear the hunters closing in. There was nowhere left to run. This was the end. Leaned against a cold stone and closed her eyes. She thought of her cubs. She hoped they knew she had tried. She hoped they would remember her kindness, even when she was gone. The hunters appeared at the mouth of the valley. 5 dark shapes, moving slowly now, savoring their victory. The lead hunter showed his teeth in a smile. You ran well, human, better than any prey I have hunted before. He stepped closer. But the chase is over. Opened her eyes. She would not look away. She would face the end with courage, the way her cubs would want her to. Then she heard it. A howl split the night, high and fierce and achingly familiar. It was followed by another and another, until 7 voices sang together in the darkness. The hunters froze. They knew that sound, every knew it. It was the call of a pack claiming their own. Shapes burst from the shadows. 7 small bodies, black as night, fast as wind. The cubs had escaped from their confinement. They had tracked across the hole, following her scent, answering her need. And now they stood between her and the hunters, their scales raised, their claws extended, their golden eyes blazing with fury. Stepped forward. He was the largest of the cubs, but still half the size of the adult hunters. It did not matter. He stood like a mountain. She is our pack, he said. His voice was young but steady, speaking the formal words of law. You will not touch her. The hunters hesitated. They looked at each other, unsure what to do. The cubs were just children. They could be pushed aside easily. But this was not about strength. This was about law. The cubs had spoken the words of claiming. They had declared as pack, as family, as theirs. In tradition, a pack bond was sacred. Even an elder could not break it. From the edge of the valley, a new voice spoke. The trial is over. Elder walked into the clearing. He moved slowly, his old body tired from the journey. He looked exhausted and trembling against the stone. He looked at the cubs, small and fierce and utterly devoted. He had come to watch a human fail. Instead, He had witnessed something that had not happened in history for 1,000 years. Cubs choosing an outsider as pack, children defending their chosen parent against their own kind. Approached slowly. The cubs tensed, ready to fight. But the old elder did not attack. Instead, he stopped in front of her and did something that made every present gasp. He lowered himself to the ground and showed his belly. It was the ultimate sign of respect, of surrender, of acknowledgement. An elder of the High Council bowing to a human. "You have done what no could do," said, his voice rough with emotion. "You taught our young that strength does not mean cruelty, that power does not mean loneliness, that being soft can be the bravest thing of all." He stood slowly and looked at the cubs. His face softened in a way that made him look almost gentle. "The trial of worth is complete. The human has proven herself. She is now Ka of these cubs." He turned to his hunters. "Spread the word. Let all know what happened here tonight." The word Ka echoed in exhausted mind. Roka had told her about it. It was an ancient title, one that had not been used in centuries. It meant Heart Guardian, the one who protected the spirit of the young. She was no longer just an observer. She was family. The cubs rushed to her, piling against her body with joyful chirps and purrs, pressed her face against cheek, curled around her protectively. The others filled every space they could find, touching her, holding her, making sure she was real. Wrapped her arms around as many of them as she could reach. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Weeks later, in the nursery that had become her home, took her afternoon nap. The routine was the same as always. She lay down, closed her eyes, and waited. The cubs came one by one, arranging themselves around her with practiced care, against her side, across her legs, the twins finding their spots, and always last, curving his growing body around them all. She could not move, she could barely breathe. She had never been happier. Outside the nursery, the galaxy had changed. The footage of the cubs defending their human had spread to every corner of known space. People everywhere watched in wonder as the children of the most feared species in the universe fought for love instead of blood. Roka had begun studying human child raising. Others were asking questions, wanting to understand how softness could create such strength. It would take generations, but change was coming. And in the quiet darkness of the nursery, surrounded by the warm weight of her sleeping children, understood something important. She had come to this station expecting to study predators. Instead, she had discovered that the most powerful force in the universe was not claws or teeth or strength. It was the simple choice to love something and to let it love you back. The cubs purred in their sleep, dreaming of hunts and games and the human who had changed everything. Smiled, closed her eyes, and joined them. In the endless dark between stars, the most feared predators in the galaxy had found something their ancestors never knew. Sometimes the safest place is not at the top of the food chain. Sometimes it is curled up next to someone who sees you not as a monster, but as family.